and the most interesting topic of neurophysiology, that is muscle spindle and the Golgi tendon organ. So what are the muscle spindles? Muscle spindles, these are the spindle-shaped proprioceptors situated in the skeletal muscles, and they are formed by modified skeletal muscle fibers known as intrafusal muscle fiber. Now let us discuss about the types and the innervations of the intrafusal muscle fibers. Let us focus on the types and the innervation of the intrafusal muscle fiber. Mainly there are two types. First is the nuclear bag fibers, and the second one, that is the nuclear chain fibers. So as you can see in this diagram, that these two, in which you can appreciate that central portion which is bulge. So these are the nuclear bag fibers. It contains the nucleus in its central portion. Another thing is nuclear chain fibers. As you can see, these are the very long and cylindrical in shape. These are the nuclear chain fibers. Coming to innervation of both of these, so nuclear bag fibers as well as the nuclear chain fibers, they both have motor as well as the sensory innervations. Means afferent fiber and efferent fiber both are present. First of all, I will talk about the afferent or the sensory. Next, I will talk about the motor or the efferent pathways. So for sensory, both the nuclear bag fibers as well as the nuclear chain fibers, they have sensory fibers. They are known as group 1A fibers, right? As you can see over here, from the nuclear bag fibers and the nuclear chain fibers, that is the group 1A fibers, common for both. Next thing is group 2 fibers. As you can see over here, that is group 2 fibers. They are also sensory, but they carry sensation only from the nuclear chain fibers. That was all about the sensory of intrafusal fibers. Now coming to motor. For the motor, we have two types, that is gamma S and gamma D. In general, gamma motor neurons are there, gamma efferent pathways are there, but we are dividing it into two. Reason for behind this that I will tell you later, but now remember that we have gamma S as well as the gamma D. So gamma S, so which is a motor pathway, or I can say the efferent pathway, gamma S, which is innervating the portion of the nuclear chain fibers, and the gamma D, which excites the end portion of the nuclear bag fibers. So do remember these things. Now I will draw a very simple diagram which will be helpful to you whenever you are trying to revise all these things, because it is little bit tricky or complex, and this diagram will definitely help you to clear your concept. So now this diagram will definitely help you to clear your doubts. So as you can see that we have discussed about the intrafusal fibers. In that there are two types. First one, that is the nuclear bag fibers. Second one, that is the nuclear chain fibers. Then we have discussed about its innervation. So innervation, which was complicated, so I have simplified it that we have sensory as well as the motor. In the sensory, we have two different fibers. First is group 1A fibers, which is common for all, and the group 2 fibers, which only carry the impulses from the nuclear chain fibers. For the motor, we have gamma efferent, that is S, and gamma efferent, that is D. So gamma efferent S only supplies to the nuclear chain fibers, and the gamma D excites the nuclear bag fibers. So this is a very simple diagram. And so before we understand the function of the muscle spindle, let us first focus on the stretch reflex. So what is stretch reflex? So basically the stretch reflex, which is a reflexive contraction of the skeletal muscle when the muscles are stretched. So that is the basic most thing about the stretch reflex. Now as we have studied the muscle spindle, it contains the intrafusal muscle fiber, efferent nerves as well as the afferent nerve fibers also, and they lie parallel with the skeletal muscle fibers, or I can say the extrafusal muscle fibers. So whenever we stretch a muscle, so along with the stretching of the extrafusal muscle fibers, there will be stretching of intrafusal muscle fibers also. Now what happens when we stretch the muscle, that we are going to understand via this diagram. So whenever we stretch the muscle, so let me apply a stretching force to this muscle, what happens is, along with the extrafusal muscle fibers, this intrafusal muscle fibers will also be stretched. Now, muscle spindle has a very important function that it detects any kind of change in the length of the muscle. So, stretching causes the change in the length which is detected by the muscle spindle, and muscle spindle send the sensory impulses. So, as we know that sensory fibers or the sensory impulses, they are carried by, that is group 1A and group 2, or I can say the primary sensory ending and the secondary sensory ending, which carry the impulses to the spinal cord via posterior nerve root, or I can say the dorsal side. Here is the dorsal root ganglion, and which enters into the spinal cord from the posterior direction. Now, after entering the spinal cord, right, it meets the alpha motor neuron. So, alpha motor neuron, as I have discussed in my previous videos of the spinal cord, that alpha motor neuron which is situated in the anterior gray horn of the spinal cord. So, as soon as the sensory impulses carried by group 1A and 2 fibers, they reach up to the spinal cord and they meet the alpha motor neuron. So, it stimulates the alpha motor neuron. From the alpha motor neuron, impulses are discharged and they terminate over the extrafusal muscle fiber, and it gives the message of contraction of the muscle fiber. So now here from this diagram we can understand how does the muscle spindle detects any change in the length of the muscle fiber, and ultimately it helps in the maintaining the posture, right? If you are having any doubts, do let me know in the comment section. So again, let us revise it. Group 1A and 2 fibers arising from the muscle spindle carry the impulses to the posterior gray horn of the spinal cord. From here, it goes anterior, alpha motor neuron is stimulated, it discharges the impulses, and then now terminate over the extrafusal muscle fiber, and it gives the message of the contraction of the muscle fiber. So now let us understand the static as well as the dynamic response of a muscle spindle to stretch. So as you can see in this diagram, on one side I have drawn only about the static, and on the another side that is only for the dynamic. So for the static, nuclear chain fibers are responsible, that when the stretch force is increased up to, or it is prolonged into the minutes, then the group 1A and the 2 fibers, right, which are the sensory from the nuclear chain fiber, they carry impulses to the spinal cord, and the gamma S fibers, that is the gamma S means here the static, and which is responsible for generating a static response in the muscle, and for the another, that is the dynamic response, nuclear bag fibers are responsible, and the sensory from group 1A only carry the impulses to the spinal cord, and the gamma D, that is the dynamic, so which is responsible for a dynamic response in the muscle fiber. So that was the difference between the static and the dynamic. Do remember the nuclear chain fiber are responsible in the static response, and the nuclear bag fibers for the dynamic response of muscle spindle to stretch. Now the last function that we are going to understand, that is the role of muscle spindle in maintaining the muscle tone. Let us understand how does the muscle spindle helps in the development of the muscle tone. So as you can see in this diagram, that first of all, the gamma motor neuron present in the spinal cord. So these are the gamma motor neuron which are present in the spinal cord. It discharges some of the impulses, and gamma motor neuron, after discharging some of the impulses, it causes the contraction of the end portion of the intrafusal muscle fibers. So the contraction which actually gives alteration in the length in the central area of the intrafusal muscle fiber. Now alteration in the length detected by those intrafusal muscle fiber will give or will discharge some of the sensory impulses, will travel through the primary and the secondary sensory neurons, and they reach up to the posterior gray horn of the spinal cord. From here they reach up to the alpha motor neuron present in the anterior gray horn, So this is the alpha motor neuron in the anterior gray horn, and the anterior gray horn in which the alpha motor neuron is present, it discharges the impulses, and through the spinal nerve it reaches up to the extrafusal muscle fiber and gives the message of the contraction of the muscle fiber. So again, let us revise the whole procedure. Gamma motor neuron discharges the impulses, causes the contraction of the end portion of the intrafusal muscle fiber, which causes the alteration in the length of the intrafusal muscle fiber. This alteration in length, which is detected because the muscle spindle, it is a proprioceptor or a receptor, or the receptor organ detects this and sends the impulses through the sensory pathway into the posterior horn of the spinal cord, and then again reflexively the alpha motor neuron present in the anterior gray horn, they are stimulated and they send messages of the contraction of the muscle, and this is how the development of the muscle tone can be explained, and muscle tone is maintained in our body. Now, abnormalities regarding this that I am going to explain in my later videos. Till then, if you are having any doubts, do let me know in the comment section. Keep learning, keep exploring, do share these videos maximum. Thank you so much for watching the video till end.